The first word my granddaughter ever said was, "Spit." Not grandma, not help, just that. And she said it like she was reading a fire alarm. I didn't even understand what she meant at first. I only remember the way her eyes looked wide, dry, too old, like she'd been awake for days while the rest of us kept sleeping. It was quiet in the kitchen. The kind of quiet that usually feels safe. But that morning, the quiet felt staged, like the house was holding its breath. My granddaughter, Maya, 9 years old, stood at the edge of the doorway with her pajama sleeves pulled over her hands. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She was just watching my mug, watching my mouth, watching the space between them. I had already poured the drink. I hadn't taken a sip yet. It was still steaming, still pretending to be harmless. Maya didn't speak. She never did. Not at school, not at home, not in any setting where adults could report progress. Doctors had names for it. Therapists had charts for it. Her mother had binders for it. To me, she was just Maya, a child who communicated in glances and small movements, like the world was a room full of tripwires. That morning, she walked straight to me. Fast, quiet. She grabbed my wrist with a strength that didn't match her body. Then she looked up into my face and said it again. Spit. 2 syllables. Clean. Certain. And then, like she was afraid the house itself could hear her, she added, "Don't swallow." Not this one. My throat tightened in a way that made swallowing impossible anyway. I slowly lowered the mug, like sudden movement might set something off. "Maya," I whispered. My voice sounded wrong in that silence. Too loud. Too normal. "Honey, what are you talking about?" She didn't answer right away. She stared at the mug like it was a snake pretending to be a rope. Then she raised one finger and tapped the rim of the cup lightly, like a warning knock. "She did it," Maya said. "Not who. Just she." And the scariest part? Maya didn't sound emotional. She sounded practiced. I followed her gaze without meaning to, and my eyes landed on the glass jar sitting on the counter. A jar with a handwritten label, neat as a greeting card. A jar my daughter-in-law had placed in my hands like it was a gift. A jar she'd smiled too hard about. I felt the smallest cold drop of realization slide down my spine, because I hadn't made this drink. And Maya wasn't trying to be dramatic. She was trying to keep me alive long enough to understand what was happening. I set the mug down. Carefully, quietly. The way you set down something you don't trust. Maya's shoulders loosened by 1/2 inch. Like she'd been holding her body in place with pure will. I swallowed air instead of liquid. And finally asked the question I didn't want answered. "Who is she?" "Maya." Maya blinked once. Then she looked toward the hallway, toward the bedroom that belonged to my son and his wife, like the name lived in there, and she whispered it. Not loud enough for the walls, but loud enough to change my life. Before I tell you what she said, I need you to decide something. If a child who has never spoken suddenly speaks one sentence, and that sentence is about something dangerous, do you believe the child immediately? Or do you talk yourself out of it because believing it would wreck your family? Drop a quick comment. Believe or doubt. I'm genuinely curious where your instincts go, because mine almost got me hurt. Maya didn't repeat the name. She didn't have to. I already knew who she meant. Because there was only one person in my life who could make a cup of calming wellness feel like a threat. My daughter-in-law, Renee. Renee was the kind of woman who could say "sweetie" and make it sound like a legal document. She didn't yell. She didn't slam doors. She didn't throw tantrums. She did something worse. She smiled and made you feel irrational for not smiling back. My son, Ethan, adored her. Not loudly, not passionately. More like he accommodated her the way people accommodate weather. He was a good man. Gentle. Apologized to strangers in traffic. Picked up trash that wasn't his. The kind of man who thought kindness could solve anything if you just applied enough of it. Renee had built her whole identity around being the capable one, the organized one, the one who kept everything together. And everyone around her played along because it was easier than disrupting the performance. Especially Ethan, especially Maya, especially me, until that mug, until that word, spit. I turned back to Maya and lowered my voice so it could barely exist. Maya, why are you telling me this now? Her eyes flicked toward the ceiling like she was checking for listeners. Then she said the sentence that made my stomach go hollow. Because she thinks you're alone this week. Renee planned everything the way some people plan funerals. Confidently. In advance. With tabs. 3 days earlier, Ethan had called me in that upbeat voice people use right before they ask for something big. Mom, he'd said. Renee found this last-minute deal for a couple's reset. Just a few nights. We really need it. I remember looking out my window at the wet street, at the mailbox leaning slightly because the post was old, and thinking, couples reset, like you could reboot a marriage like a router. And Maya? I asked. She'll be fine with you, Ethan said quickly. She likes you. And, honestly, Mom, you're calmer than we are. She relaxes around you. Renee hopped onto the call without waiting to be invited. Her voice had that cheerful polish, like she was calling from a commercial kitchen. It's super simple, she said. I wrote everything down. Meals, routines, therapy exercises, emergency contacts, all of it. Of course you did, I murmured. She laughed like I'd complimented her. And I left you something special, she added. A nighttime drink. It helps you sleep. You've been tired lately. The way she said tired lately felt like she was describing a symptom she'd been tracking. I'm fine, I said. I know, she replied instantly. That's why it'll be nice. Just take it every night. 1 cup. No skipping. No skipping. She said it gently, like advice, but it landed like an instruction. The day they left, Renee hugged Maya longer than necessary. Not warm. Not comforting. Possessive. Then she pressed the glass jar into my hands and squeezed my fingers around it like she wanted to make sure my skin remembered the texture. Don't forget, she said softly, smiling. I measured the servings. 1 cup. Every night. Ethan kissed my cheek and thanked me like I was doing him a favor. And then they drove away. And my house became too quiet. Maya stood by the front window, watching the car disappear like she was tracking the last safe thing leaving the driveway. I crouched beside her. Hey, I said. It's just us for a few days. We're gonna be okay. She didn't respond. Not unusual. But she didn't move for a long time either. Her little hand hovered near her mouth like she was holding something back. I thought it was anxiety. Now I know it was calculation. Because that first night, when I poured the drink, I did it like a normal grandmother. I didn't sniff it like a detective. I didn't take pictures. I didn't think my own family would ever put something in my cup. It smelled like lavender and citrus and expensive lies. Maya wandered in and watched silently. I lifted the mug, and that's when she grabbed my wrist. That's when she spoke. That's when my reality cracked open. Back in the present, in my kitchen, staring at the mug like it was a loaded weapon, I whispered, Maya. What did she put in it? Maya's mouth tightened, like she was trying not to cry and not to make sound at the same time. I saw, she said. White stuff. From a little bag. I felt my lips go numb. Why didn't you tell anyone? I asked. Maya's eyes went glossy, not with tears, more like with memory. Because she said, if I talk, I go back. That word does something to kids who have been moved around, like objects. Back means strangers. Back means new beds. Back means being told you don't belong anywhere long enough to unpack. My hand started to tremble. I hid it by reaching for a dish towel. Back where? I asked, even though I already knew. Maya swallowed. She said she can call the lady, the one who used to have papers about me. Her voice got smaller. She said she can tell them I'm not safe, not normal, and they'll take me. I didn't sit down. If I sat down, I was afraid I wouldn't stand back up. Did she say why she wants me asleep? I asked. Maya stared at the counter. Then she said the quietest sentence I have ever heard that still managed to scream. She said you sign when you're sleepy. I held my breath. Sign what, baby? Maya lifted her eyes to mine, and her face did something I'll never forget. She looked ashamed, like a child who'd been forced to participate in something wrong and didn't know how to wash it off. Your house, she whispered. My vision sharpened, not because I understood everything, because suddenly I understood enough. Renee didn't want me relaxed. She wanted me foggy, confused, compliant, and the terrifying part? She wasn't doing it with violence. She was doing it with politeness, with wellness, with the kind of weapon that gets waved off as harmless until you wake up and your signature is on something you don't remember signing. I looked at Maya. 9 years old, small shoulders, big eyes. She had been carrying this alone, not because she couldn't speak, because she didn't feel safe enough to. I lowered my voice to a whisper that barely existed. Maya, listen to me. She watched my mouth like she was reading. We're going to be very calm, I said. Okay? She blinked. We're going to act normal, I said. And we're going to make sure nobody can call you a liar. Maya's hands curled into her sleeves. What if she knows? She whispered. I stared at the mug, and I said the sentence that surprised even me. Then we make her think she's winning. If you're still with me right now, answer this. Because this is where people split. Would you confront Renee immediately? Or would you pretend everything is fine and quietly collect proof? Comment, confront, or trap. No judgment, just tell me what you would do when it's your own family. I dumped the drink into the sink. Not dramatically, not angrily. I poured it out like I was watering plumbing. Then I rinsed the mug. Then I turned around and smiled at Maya like everything was normal. Because fear makes you loud, and loud gets you caught. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I opened the jar again. I didn't touch it with my bare hands. I used a clean spoon, poured some into a small container, sealed it, and wrote the date on it with a marker. I took pictures of the jar, pictures of the label, pictures of the instructions Renee had left in her binder. Yes, there was a binder. People like Renee don't just manipulate. They document their manipulation so it looks like responsibility. The binder had schedules, meal plans, therapy notes, and one page titled something like, Care Routine for Evelyn, my name, like I was a pet she was boarding. And there it was, circled in cheerful ink. Night drink. Every night. No exceptions. No exceptions. A phrase that doesn't belong in kindness. It belongs in control. I texted Renee. Maya's asleep. Having your nighttime drink now. It really helps. She responded immediately. Good. Finish the whole cup. You need rest. There it was. Greed doesn't always sound greedy. Sometimes it sounds like concern. I saved the text, screen recorded it, backed it up. Then I did something I never thought I'd do in my own family's mess. I called my doctor, and I told the nurse, as calmly as I could, I think someone is trying to sedate me. There was a pause on the line. Then the nurse said, Can you come in today? Bless her for not laughing. Bless her for not asking if I watched too many documentaries. 2 hours later, I was in an exam room with Dr. Klein, a woman with tired eyes and zero patience for nonsense. You think someone is drugging you? She said flatly. I think someone is putting something in my drink, I replied. And I need it documented. Dr. Klein didn't argue. She leaned forward. Do you have a sample? I do. Good, she said. We're doing labs, full toxicology. And I'm making a report if anything shows up. A report, paper trails, the kind of thing Renee couldn't smile her way out of. On the drive home, I stopped and bought a small lockbox. Maya thought it was treasure storage. In a way, it was, because I put the jar inside, and for the first time that week, I slept with my keys in my pocket. The next morning, Maya was drawing at the kitchen table. Not scribbling, drawing carefully, like if she stayed inside the lines, the world would stay inside its boundaries too. I sat across from her and kept my voice gentle. Maya. Did Renee do this to anyone else? Maya didn't look up. Her pencil slowed. Then she said, the lady with the red nails. My stomach tightened. Who? Maya swallowed. The neighbor. The old one. The one who always gives me candy but doesn't touch me. The way she added doesn't touch me made my chest ache. I knew exactly who she meant. A woman down the block who lived alone. Sweet, forgetful, always polite. Maya kept her eyes on the paper like she couldn't handle looking at me while she said it. Renee went there, she whispered. She brought papers. She brought drinks. Drinks? I repeated softly. Maya nodded once. A tiny movement. She said the lady was confused. She said it's better if family helps. She said people will steal from her if she doesn't sign. I felt cold behind my eyes. Renee's brand of evil wasn't rage. It was help. It was acting like a savior, while quietly moving assets into her own hands. It was telling people they were too old to understand their own lives. And if that neighbor had signed something, if she'd been put somewhere for her safety, my throat burned. I didn't tell Maya all my thoughts. Kids don't need the whole horror. They just need to know you believe them. I'm glad you told me, I said. Maya's voice went smaller. She smiles when she lies, she whispered. That line hit me like a slap, because a child shouldn't be able to identify that pattern. Not at 9. Not ever. That day, I made 2 calls. One to an attorney. Not a friend of a friend. A real attorney who specialized in adult exploitation. And one to a child advocacy center. I didn't even know places like that existed until that week. The woman on the phone spoke to me like this wasn't gossip, like it was serious, like Maya mattered. We can schedule a forensic interview, she said. Child-friendly setting. Recorded. Neutral interviewer. Maya flinched at the word recorded, not because she didn't want truth, because she was afraid truth would cost her everything. I squeezed her hand. You won't be alone, I promised. The attorney, Mr. Sanders, was even more direct. Do not confront your daughter-in-law, he said. Not yet. Why? I asked. Because the moment she senses the trap, she'll flip the narrative, he replied. She'll make you look unstable, confused, paranoid. I stared at the lockbox on my counter. That word again, confused. He continued. Preserve everything. Messages, samples, instructions, any device recordings, and call protective services. Today. Paper trail. I didn't want to. Calling protective services felt like setting off a bomb inside my own family. But a bomb was already there. Renee had just disguised it as lavender. So I filed the report. Quietly. No scene. Just facts. And then I did the hardest part. I acted normal. That afternoon, Renee video called. She looked sunlit and smug, sitting somewhere pretty, wearing the kind of casual outfit that costs more than my first car. There are my girls, she sang. Maya didn't look at the screen. Renee's smile tightened just slightly like a thread pulled taut. How's Maya doing? She asked. Great, I lied. And you? She asked. You look tired. There it was again. The narrative she was planting. I smiled. Your drink knocks me out. Renee's eyes brightened with satisfaction. Good, she said softly. At your age, sleep is crucial. Otherwise, you get mixed up. You forget things. Mixed up. Forget things. I felt my pulse in my ears, but I kept my tone sweet. You're right, I said. Yesterday I couldn't remember if I locked the door. Renee laughed lightly, like that was adorable. Oh, honey, that happens. I ended the call, put the phone down, and let my smile drop. Because the second the screen went dark, the air felt poisonous. Maya looked at me. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something more. Then she didn't. Like she was still scared the walls could hear. That night, my doctor called. Her voice had changed, not panicked. Firm. Evelyn, she said. Your labs show a sedative in your system. I sat down so fast my knees popped. But I started. It doesn't matter, she cut in. It's there. And it's not a medication you're supposed to be taking. My mouth went dry, which meant one thing. Either that drink wasn't the first attempt, or Renee had been dosing me longer than this week, through food, through something else, through a moment I hadn't noticed. My doctor continued. I'm filing a report, and you need to stay with someone. I can't, I whispered, staring at Maya's small back as she colored quietly. Then you lock your doors, she said. You drink only what you prepare, and you treat this like real danger, because it is. After I hung up, I looked at Maya and realized something that made me feel sick. Maya didn't only save me from one drink. Maya might have been saving me from a slow, quiet erasure that had already started. On day 4, something almost fooled me. Almost. Maya and I went to the advocacy center. It looked like a small, cheerful house, not an office. Toys in the corner. Soft chairs. A fish tank bubbling like it didn't know what humans did to each other. Maya held my hand so tightly I could feel her heartbeat through her fingers. A woman with kind eyes introduced herself and spoke to Maya like she was important, not like a problem, not like a diagnosis, like a person. I wasn't allowed in the room during the interview. They explained why. No influence, no pressure. So I sat alone and stared at a poster on the wall that said, "You are safe here." I wanted to believe it. For 1 hour, I let myself pretend we were turning a corner. For 1 hour, I let myself breathe. Then Maya came out. Her face was pale. Her eyes were dry. She looked exhausted, but she also looked lighter, like she'd finally set something down. The interviewer walked out after her and said quietly, "Thank you for bringing her. We're forwarding this to the appropriate agencies." I swallowed. "Do you believe her?" I asked. The woman held my gaze. "We take children seriously here." My throat burned, because that sentence shouldn't feel like a gift. But in our world, it does. On the way home, Maya asked for fries. Just fries. Normal kid request. We sat in the car with greasy paper bags and an old pop song on the radio, and for 10 minutes it almost felt like we were just family. And that's when I remembered the rule Renee lived by. When things feel safe, that's usually when she moves. That night, a package arrived. A small box. I hadn't ordered anything. No return label. Just my name and address in clean handwriting. I stared at it in the entryway while Maya watched from the stairs. My palms went cold. I opened it slowly. Inside was a pen. A nice pen. Heavy. Expensive looking. And a sticky note. 2 words. Written like a joke. For signing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood there with that pen in my hand and felt something in me go very still. Because that wasn't random. That was a message. A reminder. A way of saying, I'm not far. I'm still controlling this. I put the pen in the lockbox. Then I did the next thing. I installed cameras. Nothing fancy. Small, discreet ones that looked like normal home gadgets. One in the kitchen. One pointed at the entryway. Maya watched me with wide eyes. "Spy stuff?" she whispered. "Boring spy stuff," I murmured. "The kind with Wi-Fi passwords and back pain." Maya almost smiled. Almost. That night, she couldn't sleep. She crawled into my bed and lay stiff beside me like her body didn't remember how to relax. "She comes tomorrow?" she whispered. "In 2 days," I said. Maya swallowed. "When she gets mad." I stared at the ceiling, and I realized something that made my chest ache. Maya wasn't just afraid of Renee doing something to me. Maya was afraid of what happens after Renee gets caught. Because kids like Maya have learned a brutal lesson. When adults fight, kids get moved, kids get blamed, kids get lost. I turned my head and whispered into the dark. "You're staying with me." Maya didn't answer, but her breathing changed. Just slightly, like she wanted to believe me, and didn't know how. The day they returned, I did something petty and symbolic. I made pancakes, not because I wanted comfort, because I wanted the scene to look normal. I wanted Renee to walk into warmth and smell and routine. I wanted her to feel safe. People confess faster when they think they've already won. The driveway crunch told me before the door opened. Maya stood behind the curtain, trembling. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Behind me," I whispered. The key turned. The door opened. Renee walked in first, glowing like she'd just been worshipped by sunlight. Ethan came in behind her with bags, looking tired and happy, the way people look when they believe their home is still their home. "Mom," Ethan said, hugging me. I hugged him back and felt grief try to rise. Because I loved him, because he didn't know, because he was about to find out who he married. Renee hugged me too, a theatrical squeeze. Then she pulled back and scanned my face with subtle hunger, looking for droopy eyes, slurred words, confusion. I gave her none of it. She blinked, recalibrating. Then she snapped into her next role. Concerned manager. "Evelyn," she said. "I spoke with someone while we were away." I tilted my head. "Oh? A planner," she said brightly. "It's just responsible. If you ever get overwhelmed, we have paperwork in place." Ethan frowned. "Renee." She cut him off with a smile. "I'm helping, Ethan." Then she placed a folder on my table like it was dessert. "There's a power of attorney form," she said. "And some property paperwork. Nothing scary, just signatures." I looked at the folder, then I looked at Maya. Maya's small hand slid into mine, sweaty and shaking. I squeezed back. Renee noticed the grip. Her smile tightened a fraction. "Go play, Maya," she said, still smiling. Maya didn't move. Renee's voice sharpened just slightly under the sweetness. "Maya?" I gently slid my chair back and patted my lap like I was inviting a cat. Maya stepped closer instead. She stayed behind my shoulder. I looked at Renee and smiled. "Walk me through it," I said softly. "I want to understand." Renee relaxed. Of course she did, because she thought I was finally being compliant. She flipped pages and started speaking quickly, too quickly, like someone reciting lines they'd practiced in a mirror. "This is just to help with bills if you get forgetful," she said. "And this one puts the house into a family trust. Totally normal. Everyone does it," I interrupted gently. "And the drink?" Renee blinked. "The drink?" "The nighttime drink," I said, still smiling. "The one you insisted I take. Every night. No skipping." Ethan's head turned sharply. "What drink?" he asked. Renee laughed too brightly. "Oh my God, Evelyn. It's herbal. It's for sleep." I nodded slowly, and then I said, "Maya? Sweetheart?" Maya's body went rigid. For half a second, she looked like she might disappear into herself again. Then she took a breath. And my 9-year-old granddaughter, who had been silent for so long that people stopped expecting sound from her, spoke in the middle of my kitchen. Clear, steady, not loud, but undeniable. "She put medicine in it," Maya said. Renee went still, not angry, frozen, like her mind hit a wall it didn't expect to be there. Maya kept going, voice trembling now but still moving forward like a train that wouldn't stop. She said, "If I tell, I go back. She said you get sleepy, you sign. She said you won't remember." The room became vacuum silent. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like his brain couldn't decide what reality it was in. "Renee," he whispered. "What is she talking about?" Renee turned to me, eyes sharp. "She's confused," she snapped, then softened instantly. "She's imaginative." I tilted my head. "Is she?" I asked gently. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Not dramatically, not triumphantly, just calmly, like I was setting a glass of water on the table. "I saved your texts," I said, telling me to finish the entire cup. "Every night." Renee's eyes flickered. I continued. "My doctor found a sedative in my system. Ethan inhaled like he'd been punched. Renee's smile collapsed for the first time. And I added the final piece. And my kitchen camera recorded your call where you said, "At your age, you get mixed up." Renee's head snapped up. "You recorded me!" I tapped the screen. Her own voice filled the kitchen, bright, casual, cruel in its softness. "At your age, you get mixed up." Renee lunged forward, one instinctive step, not to hit me, to grab the phone, to erase reality, but she stopped, because there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp knocks, and the timing was so perfect it didn't feel real. Ethan stared at the door. "Who?" I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my hands were steady. I opened the door. A woman with a badge stood beside a uniformed officer. "Miss Hart?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm with Protective Services," she said calmly. "And this is Detective Reyes. We need to speak with you." Behind me, Renee made a thin sound like air being pulled through a straw. Ethan looked like he might faint. He turned to me, voice cracking. "Mom, what did you do?" I didn't look away from him. "I protected us," I said quietly. "And I protected Maya." Renee backed up, shaking her head fast. "This is insane," she said. "This is a misunderstanding." Detective Reyes stepped forward, voice flat. "We have a report, medical documentation, recorded statements, and reason to believe you attempted to obtain signatures through chemical impairment." Renee's lips parted. She looked at Ethan like he would rescue her out of habit. He didn't. He stared at her like he'd never seen her before, and in that stare, I watched his entire marriage collapse without a single shout. Renee tried to cry. It came out too late, too clean, too practiced. And then the Protective Services woman said one sentence that erased the last bit of Renee's control. "We also have the child interview." Renee's face drained, because she hadn't expected Maya to speak. She'd built her whole plan on Maya's silence. And now, that silence was gone. Later that night, after statements and paperwork and quiet sobbing that didn't fix anything, my house was still, not peaceful, just still. Maya sat at my kitchen table with a mug of cocoa I made myself. No herbs, no mystery powders, no help. She sipped carefully, like she still didn't trust liquids. Ethan had left hours earlier, hollowed out, with the kind of face men get when they realize they were used as a bridge. Renee was gone with the detective. No screaming, no revenge fantasy, just consequences arriving with clipboards. And you'd think the story ends there, but it doesn't, because the scariest part wasn't the folder, or the drink, or the pen that showed up with, "for signing." The scariest part came near the end, when everyone stopped talking and Maya finally looked at me and said something I haven't been able to sleep through since. She stared at the lockbox on my counter. Then she whispered, "She practiced your signature." I felt my lungs stop working. "What?" Maya's voice was tiny again. "She made me watch. On her tablet. She traced it. She said old people all sign the same when they're sleepy." My skin went cold, because that meant Renee didn't just want me confused. She had prepared for me to be gone from the process entirely, prepared to move things forward with or without my hand. And then Maya added the detail that turned my stomach. She said if you wake up, she'll say you forgot. She'll say you're sick, mixed up, confused, forgetful. That narrative again. Not just for Ethan, for everyone, for courts, for doctors, for the world. I crouched beside Maya's chair and rested my hand lightly on her shoulder, not squeezing, not forcing comfort, just being there. Maya looked at me with eyes that had lived through too much. "Am I in trouble?" she whispered. That question, from a 9-year-old, not, "Is she mad?" Not, "Will Dad be okay?" "Am I in trouble?" I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "You're not in trouble." Maya's lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry. "Will they send me back?" she asked. And there it was. The leash Renee had kept around Maya's throat. I swallowed, tasting metal. "I don't know what the court will do," I said. "Because lying to kids is another kind of harm." But then I added, Truthfully, I do know this. You're not alone anymore. Maya stared at me for a long time. Then, like she was testing the idea of having a voice without punishment, she said the word I didn't expect. Grandma. My throat tightened. Yes, baby. She looked down at her cocoa and whispered. I'm glad you didn't swallow. I wrapped my arms around her carefully, not like a victory, like a promise, and we stayed like that in the quiet kitchen, not celebrating, not relieved, just sitting in the aftermath of what almost happened. Because families don't bounce back from things like this. They just rearrange around the damage. Before I went to bed, I opened the lockbox one last time. Inside was the jar. Inside was the pen. Inside was the truth. And taped to the underside of the lid something I hadn't put there. A small piece of paper, folded twice. My hands went cold as I unfolded it. It was a copy of a form, not filled out, just printed. At the top, in bold, temporary guardianship consent. My name typed under grantor, Renee's name typed under proposed guardian, and a blank line where my signature would go. I stood in the dark kitchen holding that paper like it was a dead insect, because Renee hadn't just wanted my house. She wanted Maya, not because she loved her, because controlling Maya's story controlled everyone's story. I folded it back up, put it in the lockbox, locked it, and then I sat at the table in silence until the sun started changing the color of the floor. No happy ending, just a quiet understanding. Some people don't need to hit you to ruin you. They just need you tired. One last thing, this is where I want to hear from you, because there isn't a clean answer. If you were me, and you had to choose what mattered more in that moment, 0 equals protect the family image and handle it privately. 1 equals blow it up with evidence and involve the authorities. Comment 0 or 1. And if you think there's a third option I'm not seeing, say it, because I still sit in that quiet kitchen sometimes and wonder what kind of person I became the moment I didn't swallow.